My name is Andwele Jolly. I serve as the Executive Director for Pathology and Immunology at Washington University School of Medicine. I started off my career with WashU as an undergraduate student in 1998, and I stayed on to do my doctoral work in physical therapy. And subsequently I left, but then came back to do a fellowship in healthcare finance. Moving to St. Louis for some was like, well, why there? It's in the middle of nowhere, you don't have a beach. If you're comfortable sitting in an hour worth of traffic to go 5 miles, that's your business. But I like the fact that I can bike, walk, get to places fairly easily, and raise a family in a very supportive community. As people say, it's just easy to live here.
My name is Kaytlin Reedy-Rogier. I'm a social worker. I work for the Integrated Health Network in St. Louis. My job with the Integrated Health Network is to work with the med schools in St. Louis to help them with their curriculum. So one of the cool things about where we live is obviously living in the firehouse, which just in general people are like, what? It was decommissioned 1963, 1964, but when it was in operation, it was one of the busiest fire stations in the country. Yeah, it's sort of a cool place to live.
My name is Isaac Butler. I am Vice President for the Center for Career Services and Education at the St. Louis College of Pharmacy, and also Chief Diversity Officer. We moved around this neighborhood quite a bit on the south side of Walnut Park because my mom was a single parent mother and struggled financially at times. But this street was the house that we stayed at the longest from the time I grew up until about 7th grade. Like me, a lot of my family members have moved away, but I still have a few that live in the neighborhood. St. Louis has a lot of challenges, but when you're from St. Louis, you love St. Louis. A lot of us say we so St. Louis, and so I am so St. Louis.
My name is Dennis Chang. I'm an internal medicine physician at WashU. I'm what's called a hospitalist, which is I only see patients who are admitted to the hospital. I'm also the Interprofessional thread director for the MD curriculum, as well as part of the new curriculum build for the Gateway new curriculum. We've lived here about 2 years now. We had visited here maybe a year before. One of the things that I've done is just drive around and just understand that those neighborhoods are all different and unique. The outside perception is that it's this sort of Midwest homogeneous city, but actually it's really not.
Hi, my name is Quinn Tyminsky, and I'm an occupational therapist specializing in community-based mental health and homelessness. And I am an instructor here in the program in occupational therapy at Washington University School of Medicine. So I was born and raised here, and I've never really lived anyplace else other than an undergrad. I actually have a St. Louis tattoo. It gets a bad rap, but it is absolutely a fabulous city despite having issues that every city has.
When looking for neighborhoods, I wanted to be close to Forest Park because my wife and I, when we were an undergrad, Forest Park was right there in front of the Danforth campus. Having access to the History Museum, the Art Museum, everything that the park has, we wanted to be close to that. So we kind of looked around that. We looked at Clayton, we looked at University City, we looked at DeBoliver, we looked at Central West End, and we looked at the Grove, and all for different reasons. And we ended up choosing this particular neighborhood because it had a vibrancy that is fairly unmatched, I think, with other communities, and one that was highly inclusive and very diverse. The spectrum lives here. Great racial diversity, great gender diversity. This is a very LGBTQ-friendly neighborhood, as well as intergenerational diversity. So it's one where I can be myself and not feel different. One of the things I always knew about that happened in the city was the naked bike ride. Saw it in the news, but I didn't really know exactly where. I know it was in the city until we moved to the Grove 2 years ago, and then we're on the porch and my son goes, "Hey, look, there's lots of naked people on bikes." And I'm like, "What?" But it was awesome. It was, it was a good time, and we just kind of explained to the kids what were happening. But I would say that was a classic welcome to the neighborhood. I think that sort of describes what the Grove is. You can be you in all your elements. You can argue if that's too much, but it's one thing that gives me comfort.
We sort of straddle the Central West End and the Grand Center Arts District. It's been really wonderful, and it has its challenges at the same time. I think we underestimate exactly how much sidewalks matter. I don't feel comfortable taking my stroller into the street, and I don't want to go into somebody's lawn, so I have a workaround. where we end up actually going up to Grand Center instead of sort of staying in our own neighborhood. It certainly communicates something about how much we care about the people that live in these neighborhoods. The public schooling system in St. Louis in general is shoddy at best, and we have a school right across the street that I would love to be able to send my kids to. There's literally a crosswalk from our house to the school, and we would really love for our boys to be able to go there. With St. Louis public schools, there's lots and lots of issues, and one of the big ones I think is turnover within the administration and how that kind of lead to some toxic school environments. So this is the corner of Delmar and Vandevenner. This is where sort of the Delmar divide begins. If we want to get pizza delivered, for example, our pizza place that will deliver to us is on Kings Highway, which is about 3 miles away. And there's a Domino's on Lindell that is less than a mile away that will not deliver to us because of where we're located. When they see our address and they like figure it out, like, oh, actually we don't go north of Delmar. And they'll like say that very explicitly. Where money and things are, like those kinds of conveniences are the things that build up neighborhoods. And if you can't even get a business to deliver to your house, like how difficult it will ever be to sort of lift the neighborhoods up if we can't entice people to come in to bring services into the area.
My mom was a single parent. I have a younger sister. My father went to jail when I was 8, and we lived without a lot of resources growing up. But my mom knew the importance of education, so despite our resources or a lack of resources, she really pushed education. While she was pushing education, we had a dilemma. This school being in St. Louis Public, at the time it wasn't a very high-performing school, and my mom had to make a decision on whether or not to send me to school literally across the street and around the corner, and it would have taken me probably 5 minutes to walk to school, or enroll me in the desegregation program where I had to take an 1.5-hour bus ride out to the Lindbergh School District. And so she decided to enroll me in the desegregation program. And so I went to actually 5 different elementary schools. And I went to 5 different elementary schools because, as I mentioned before, my mom was really focused on education, and she knew that the high-performing schools were in the suburbs in predominantly white neighborhoods. And at the same time, many members of my family were quite honestly fearful for my safety going out as a little black child in all white environments. Walnut Park is in the Promise Zone, and it's called the Promise Zone because it has high amounts of unemployment, violence, crime, and really people that are disadvantaged. And it's called the Promise Zone because even though those people are disadvantaged in a lot of ways, there's a lot of promise in this community, and hopefully I'm an example of that. At that time, she wanted to move out of the city for safety, and we moved to Berkeley. Berkeley wasn't too much safer than the city, although a little bit at that time back in the 90s. So that's where I went to high school. I went to Berkeley High School, another predominantly African-American school. Didn't have the resources that could effectively prepare me for college. However, I did great at Berkeley and went to undergraduate at the University of Missouri-Columbia. And I specifically chose Mizzou because I wanted to go to a predominantly white institution, thinking back to that time in my desegregation experience. And one of the key lessons that experience taught me is I have to learn the game. And so I needed to understand and learn dominant culture, and specifically dominant white culture. And I knew, even at a young age, if I'm going to be successful, I'm going to have to learn this culture very intimately. It's been a long journey when I think back to sitting in this parking lot, and I do remember playing in this parking lot. At that time, I was a kid with low resources, and now as an individual who's privileged to have higher resources, it gives me kind of goosebumps sitting here at this moment right now.
So we live in Olivet, Missouri. It's in Ladue County. We were in New York, New Jersey for more than a decade. My wife's an oncologist as well, and our life was getting a little too busy. We have 3 sons, and so we really wanted to spend more time at home. I used to actually commute 2 hours every day. What's interesting is, we have the privilege as physicians to be able to choose where we live. We chose here for the school district. We know our son needs services, and this district provides those services. The biggest concern we had was whether we'd be accepted here. When you're not white and you're Asian, you worry that there will be racial issues that you have to deal with. I grew up in Los Angeles. My wife grew up in New Jersey. We lived in New York. There was sort of natural diversity that was there as well as for the kids, and that continues to be a worry now. Issues that I worried about, I haven't seen here a lot. Certainly not at work or at WashU at all. I think what I've also found here is that there's so many people here who are working to make it better.
This is West County, St. Louis. This is sort of peak suburbia. This is where I grew up. This is sort of where my roots are. I actually don't live here anymore, but I spent so much time here that I feel like this is a place that really shaped a lot of who I am, but it also was a place that I had to spend a lot of time breaking down. When I went to OT school and sort of started practicing and spent a lot of time in different areas of St. Louis, I really had to go back and understand my upbringing here in West County to be able to move forward and understand who I am as an OT. This is the house I grew up in. This is my parents' house. They still live here today. We come here on occasion to see my parents and visit the suburbs. We're about a quarter mile up the road from my parents' house. I think it's really interesting and sort of a commentary on this neighborhood is that I walked here from kindergarten. So at the age of 5, my family felt comfortable enough to let me in. Of course, there were a couple other kids, but we walked together up here every day and back, sort of unsupervised. And I think that's sort of an interesting comment on the safety of the neighborhood and the neighborhood itself, that it was totally okay for, you know, a 5-year-old to walk to school and back about a quarter of a mile. So people who live here, and a lot of the high schoolers will tell you it is the public-private schools. So a lot of the kids could choose to go private. The parents have the money, but they don't need to because the public schools are good enough. So in St. Louis, the famous question is, what high school did you go to? This is actually a way to tell 2 things. One, St. Louis is a big, small town. Believe it or not, everybody knows everybody. Even though it's a city, it's somehow amazing. Everyone knows everyone. So somebody will ask you, oh, what high school did you go to? I'd say Parkway West, and they would say, oh my gosh, do you know so-and-so? Chances are high that if I didn't know so-and-so, I probably knew so-and-so's sibling because they were in my grade level. So that's the first reason they ask the question. The second reason is socioeconomic status. That is what they are determining. You know, people are going to infer something if you say something in South County, something in North County, something in the city, something in Illinois. They're sort of taking what that high school is and then inferring the bias that we have from St. Louis.
And would I consider St. Louis home? Yeah, I do. I think it's all about community. I think I've found a community here in terms of where I live. I found a community at work. Overall, it's the decision that had to be made. I don't see how we could have gone on the way we were.
It was really important to us to stay in the city. Like, Ben is big about history and character, and the city obviously has that in spades.
You don't have to have $1 million, you know, to go to the zoo or take your kids to the museum. That's what makes St. Louis unique, is its affordability and access to folks along the economic spectrum.
Try to put your bias away and go to all those different areas and check them out. And I think a chance to really explore that can give you a really great picture of what St. Louis is and help you understand maybe some of the dynamics and disparities that exist here.
Don't allow what you see on the TV and the media to define populations of people. It's critical that you engage people at the individual level, learn their personal stories. We all as healthcare providers have a level of power that we can lend and use in order to improve the health of the people that we're serving.